Well, hello and welcome to our Facebook Live Q&A. It's not quite like doing it from the moon, you know, but sometimes with Facebook it can be. We're here. I hope you're logging on and saying hello. My name's Zemiro, obviously. I'm the host of ABC. Well, I'm not the only host. I'm the co-host of tonight's Stargazing Live on the ABC with Brian Cox, my favourite northerner who sings and looks at the stars. Tonight we are going to be out gazing again, but this time we're not looking at the stars. We are looking beyond the stars to the moon, of course, as the world celebrates 50 years since humans first set foot there. This morning, though, we are taking your questions on space exploration because that's the sort of service we like to provide here at the ABC. But make them just questions about space exploration, please. Be specific. I have with me here to help me out because I'm your average punter. Interested punter. They've got a few little experts here, which is good. Dr. Phil Edwards is here with us. He's head of radio astronomy for the National Science Agency, the CSIRO, an all-round trivia guru. Is that true, Phil?
No.
No, great, that's correct. And also with me is Dr. Elias Aboutanios.
That's right.
Aboutanios, you see. Where are you from, Elias?
Lebanese originally.
Lebanese originally, fantastic. An associate professor at UNSW School of Electrical Engineering. Also, you teach space mission science, space law and signal processing. And you've also worked on developing off-world rovers, drones and high-altitude balloons. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. As we wait for the questions to come in, a lot of people have obviously asked, where were you when they actually land on the moon? I was 2 and I was in France. I was born in France, so it was sort of 3 a.m. in the morning there. I'm pretty sure Mum and I were asleep. We didn't have a television, but my dad was a waiter in Saint-Tropez at a restaurant there, and they had a television that someone had put in a television there, and he got to watch it live. What about you, Elias?
I wasn't even born.
I love that answer, because some people weren't, were they? They weren't even born. When but what got you first interested in space and in
Look,
the moon?
I've loved engineering since I was very little, and I was sort of slanted towards physics/engineering, and I did electrical engineering, and space is always fascinating. I mean, not just to me, to almost everybody.
Yeah, it's become that, hasn't it? I have to say, when I first started doing Stargazing, the program, the amount of people who I would not think were into space came out of the woodwork, and that was really interesting to me, just going, I'd go to space for sure. What about you, Phil? Did you see the moon landing?
Yes, I was in primary school at the time, so I remember that I'd got the day off school. We had just bought our first black and white TV, so I was allowed to stay home and watch the moon landing.
How lovely. And so your parents, were your parents into it too, or did they feel it was a significant thing?
Yeah, my father was a high school teacher, which is possibly why I went down the path I have. In fact, he was just reminiscing the other day that he had gone to school that day. It was Monday, I think it was. But all the kids were sent home so they could watch on their TV, so he was in the staff room with all the other teachers watching on the one TV in the school at the time.
Fantastic. But isn't that interesting, a directive actually saying to children, you must go home, you must go and watch this? I don't know if that would happen.
No, I can't imagine any kind of event where that would happen these days.
No, where they actually... And, you know, I suppose what's interesting too is that 1969, it's a different time, a real moment of, a real time of, not innocence exactly, but this was such a big deal.
Yeah.
The moon landing, in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, there are satellites going up, being launched all the time now, but back then, particularly crewed missions, it was a big deal. And there'd been some failures beforehand.
That's right.
So a heart and mouth kind of moment.
Yeah, and to see it in our own lounge rooms. So tonight on the Stargazing program, we'll be talking to lots of people who are involved in getting that footage. Actually, so a lot of people talk about Parkes as a place, of course, that the dish there did contribute to that moment. But Honeysuckle Creek is another location where a lot of people don't know about, that actually took the feed from that moment where Neil actually steps onto the moon. So we'll be talking about that tonight, and also training up some young astronauts to be, possibly. I mean, I couldn't pass any of those tests. Those young people are very switched on, so good on them. Now, we've got some questions coming in. This is good. Our first question is from Aidan. He asks, what is a realistic timeline for getting to Mars? Oh, they love the Mars questions, don't they?
Yeah.
Who wants to take that?
Well, it takes about 9 months to send a satellite to Mars. Mars is further from the sun than us, and about every 26 months is the ideal time to launch something to Mars. It takes about 9 months to get there. So if we're sending a crewed mission to Mars, you'd want to take a few good books to read on the way.
Yes. People might think now they'd be taking some kind of DVD situation, wouldn't they? Streaming something. No, they wouldn't. They'd be watching the ABC on iView. Of course they would be.
Of course they would.
And maybe some funny videos on Facebook, I don't know. We put this to our Facebook audience already. If you were heading to the moon, what song would you really want to listen on that journey? I mean, Bowie's always an answer, you know, because he's a star man, but...
What, as a passenger or
as
operating the...
Oh, well, you'd probably be operating, wouldn't you, Elias? You'd be there. But what would you want to play? Something to keep you focused?
Oh, geez, maybe some AC/DC.
AC/DC, something Australian. I think that's also the correct answer. I like silence, though, sometimes. I need a little bit of focusing silence, some classical music, maybe, to get me up into space, possibly. The next question's from Penny. Hello, Penny. Thank you. Where are we most likely to find life in the solar system, and will it be from robotics or astronauts?
Ooh.
Great question.
That's an astronomy question.
So there's a lot of interest in Mars. We believe now that water did flow on Mars sometime in its past. There's ice under the surface of Mars, we now think. So there's the possibility of microbial life on Mars, and so a lot of interest in exploring Mars. Beyond Mars, some of the satellites of Saturn and Jupiter also, we believe, have liquid oceans underneath, covered by ice or rocky surfaces. So sunlight's very low there, so it's not the kind of life that we imagine here, but there's could be some form of life on those satellites.
I think Europa is the one that is probably most famous.
Yes, and Titan. There's
As a non-astronomer, I know it because it's famous.
But we were talking before about how incredible it was to put a man on the moon. But Elias, with your students, you're actually putting things into space, which is something that no one would have believed possible.
Yeah, this is how far we've come. I mean, you know, which is great for the future because you can see the accelerating path. But you look at you know, even as far back as the late 90s. It was still a big deal to put something up in space. It was big, cost a lot of money. Really, it was you know, up till the 80s, it was governments that did it. From the 80s, private sector started doing it. Now universities with small teams do it. 2 years ago, we put up a satellite in space. You know, it was one of 3 Australian satellites. You know, it was the first Australian satellite in 15 years, so it was amazing.
And with students too.
Students.
Involved.
Yes, students, a small number of volunteer staff, and a shoestring budget. I mean, when you think of a satellite, you think of something costing, you know, $100 million plus, you know, between constructing it, launching it. We did it on less than $1 million.
Oh, we're always scraping for money here at the ABC as well. We understand completely. Hello, Raj. Raj is asking me a personal question, bless. Would Julia go to space and what would she want to do there? All right. I did go to NASA as part of the Stargazing specials that we've already done and did a few training programs. And at one point they wanted to put me in a suit and I'm quite claustrophobic. So that's my first... If you're claustrophobic, not only are you in a small capsule, you're actually in actual... It was intense. So we put someone else in the spacesuit and he was finding it quite intense as well. And he's had some training. So there's that sort of aspect. I think though for me, one of the big moments of going up into space would be being able to look back at Earth from far away. I would love to see that image for real with my own eyes. They talk about possibly that image when it was first publicised, actually starting almost the environmental movement in terms of saying, look at this lovely little planet, this blue ball, that's where we live, we should look after her. And that's very much where I'm coming from. So yeah, I think that would be my highlight. What about you, if you went into space?
Yeah, it would be hard to top, sort of looking back at Earth and realising that pale blue dot is where all of humanity lives. So yeah, we should look after it.
Tonight on the show, I don't know if it'll make it to air, but during the filming I did sort of say to the audience, there were 300 people there, I said, oh, if you could go to space tomorrow, would you? Most hands shot up.
Yeah, of course.
Elias, would you go tomorrow?
Of course I would.
Of course I would. He's right in, fantastic. How long would you go for though? I mean, would you have limits?
Look, it depends on what the reason is. I mean, you know, it's a bit like whether you're going for a holiday or going for work, right?
Just for a holiday. What about you, Phil? Would you go?
Yeah, yes. I'd have some, motion sickness.
Yeah, me too. It's a thing. There's
be
the vomit
careful,
comet. You know, you
Yes.
can't if you got to stay dry in the vomit comet. We've got some great questions coming in, everyone. Thank you. Patricia asks, this is another astronomy question. Is it possible to put a telescope on the dark side of the moon? Considering light pollution, the next generation won't have the view we do.
Good question. Well, firstly, there is a dark side of the moon, but it's not always dark.
And there's a Pink Floyd song as well,
Correct.
just quietly. Yeah.
So there's one side of the moon is always facing us. So there's the far side of the moon, which we don't get to see from Earth, but the darkness sort of as the moon moves around the Earth, it becomes dark and light. Yes, there's a lot of interest in putting telescopes on the far side of the moon because they are blocked from all the radiation coming from Earth. So yes, it's possible to do it, but how do you power it? If you've got solar panels, or they see the sun for about 14 days and then they're in darkness for 14 days. So there are those kind of things to think about. But indeed, there is a lot of thought being given to how you might do it.
Elias, what are you working on at the moment with your students?
So I've got a large group of undergraduate students that I mentor. So we had the satellite that burnt up in December 2018, so about 6 months ago. That was done when I was part of the Australian Centre for Space Engineering Research, plug them.
Yeah, plug away.
And so that was an incredible success. We loved it. Now with my students, we do, space is quite intense. It's it's a multidisciplinary area. You got electrical, you got mechanical, you got scientists, you got computing. All sorts of different areas. So I've got a diverse group of students, and we're looking at things like Mars rovers. We're looking at high altitude balloons. So how high altitude balloons would be useful for telescopes. They put you sort of outside the atmosphere, outside the majority of the atmosphere. We're doing satellites. You talked about the Parkes telescope, the dish. We've got a ground station. So, different diverse areas of space.
And there are more and more students wanting to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, in Australia, we've had a bit of a rough ride because, space, even though there's a lot of private interest, it's still perceived as a government thing. And it still needs, whether we like it or not, government interest for it to happen. The government doesn't have to do space, but they have to be open and supportive. And we've seen that come about with the Australian Space Agency. So things are changing, and with that comes the increased interest. So yes, we're looking very, very positive.
Because we know there's a lot of students now who genuinely, a friend of mine went back to her old school the other day to give a speech, and in the foyer of one of the buildings was this huge poster, and it was a program for girls to go to NASA to do a course. And she was like, how did I miss out on this? And she missed out because she's just not the right age. She would have done it in a heartbeat. And there it is now. So, it's not it is actually a possibility, a real possibility.
And you don't have to actually study something that's got space in it to do space.
That's
If you're an electrical engineer, I've got like I said, I've got 80 plus students. They come from electrical, mechanical, and so forth. The group is called BlueSat, and it's a student-led project. We've got other student-led projects. It's by far the biggest. This is a self-recruiting group. It's amazing the interest that space generates.
Yeah, there you go. You can go for it. You even just present it on television, even if you can't do the science of it. Peter asks, hello Peter, why is it necessary for intelligent life to be carbon-based and only viable in a water-oxygen environment?
Great question.
Great question. I'll leave it to experts.
So that describes us, carbon-based water environment. So that's what we think of for intelligent life. That's not to say the universe has come up with other ways of forming life, but we know ourselves, we know how we operate, and so that's, to us, it's the obvious kind of life to look for. But who knows what the universe has in store?
And sometimes, are we that intelligent life, humans? I don't know anymore. I get a little bit funny about it. What's stopping us from exploring deeper into space?
The engineering, I guess.
The engineering, yeah.
And the cost.
That too. I mean, that comes with the, engineering has to make it safer, more realistic, and less costly. You know, when you think about going deeper into space, if we're talking about, I mean, you know, we've gone really far into space, but without humans. Humans have only been to the moon. You know, if you want to be facetious, you can say, okay, we've been to the other side of the moon, we've gone around the moon, so we've been a bit further than the moon.
Yeah.
But to go to Mars, for example, the challenges are huge. You know, from life support systems to, you know, lifting the materials that you need to transport you there, to keep you alive, and to get you back. And that's the other big question. You know, getting people back is not simple. You know, it was a challenge from the moon. It's a bigger challenge from Mars or anywhere further. Yeah, it's not easy. So, but you know, we're intelligent. I hope.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So I hope. Yeah, we're working hard to solve these things, and yeah, we've got good hope.
We show a lot of footage tonight in the program, obviously, about you know, the control rooms as they're watching the moon landing and also takeoff. And what strikes me every time when I see that footage is the human endeavour of it. It's all those people, a lot of guys, I won't lie, but a lot of people very invested in what's going on and playing their small part in a team. When I went to NASA to work with Stargazing and talked to some crews, so these are people who've been working on this project for 10 years for one moment of actually getting up there. I mean, they play the long game, don't they? They're really incredible people. And again, showing what you can do when you put together this brain, this heart, this endeavour of getting out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's stories of people who worked on satellite missions for 10 years. It gets launched and blows up. And it's all that effort wasted. It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. And of course, on the moon, they weren't only there to land on it, they actually got some, you know, they were getting actually some things from the moon, they were getting samples. And also, they were, the people at Honeysuckle Creek who were running what was going on, they were also measuring their heartbeats and measuring their actual statistics, what was going on with them. And we'll talk about that tonight on the show, which is fascinating. What kind of important things would you want to get from the moon if you're up there?
Well, a couple of the things that the Apollo astronauts did as well was to put some seismometers on the moon to detect moonquakes, and there are such things as moonquakes. They detect both quite deep within the moon, so that's telling us something about how the moon's interior. And also, whenever a meteorite or an asteroid collides with the moon, they could detect that on their seismometers as well. So the interior of the moon, studded with moonquakes rather, is a fascinating thing. They also put these reflectors on the moon's surface, and so by putting pulses of laser light up and measuring how long it takes to come back, we now know that the moon is slowly moving away from the Earth at about 3.8 centimetres per year. So yeah, fascinating the things you can learn with some simple experiments.
We do a simple experiment tonight in the show. I physically didn't have to touch anything. I did shake a bottle with some alcohol in it, real alcohol, not vodka or gin. We do a bit of rocket fuel, a bit of a rocket fuel experiment tonight. Don't try it at home, obviously, unless perhaps if you've got someone responsible, maybe like Phil and Elias, who knows?
Julia, just one little thing about the whole Apollo program and the moon landing. I know you sort of said that it was a lot of guys, but I loved the movie Hidden Figures, and I loved the role that women played. I mean, it was one of the most touching movies I've seen. And, you know, it's great to see that women play the role, even though it was majority guys, like you said, but, you know, the role that women are playing is growing, and that's really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Will humans ever leave the Milky Way?
Not in our lifetime. It's an awful long way to go. So it would probably take a crewed mission about 100 years to get just to the nearest star. So we're talking generations of astronauts to get beyond the Milky Way. So maybe sometime in the future.
Well, it's always sometimes in the future,
yes,
maybe. Yeah.
But a long way into the future if it ever happens.
Yeah. Elias?
Yeah. Well, you know, the technological aspects of it. So you've got the speed that you got to travel at. When you consider that the fastest object, you know, that humans have made and launched is Voyager. It's traveling at 61,000 kilometers per hour. So that's 17 kilometers per second. Now, you know, light travels 18,000 times faster than that. So, you know, for us to cross, to get to the nearest star, is a huge challenge. And the other thing is, it's not just going that fast, but how to actually go that fast. The fuel that you're talking about, rocket fuel. You know, the problem with launching from Earth, the biggest problem is that you have to carry the fuel that's propelling you, which is, you know, when you look at Saturn, the Saturn V rocket, the amount of weight mass that they launched to the moon is less than 2% of the rocket weight.
Yeah, so many challenges, and we talk a little bit about that tonight as well. Fuel, the heaviness of fuel, getting things up. It was great with some, you know, proper experts like our friends here. Patrick asks, does radiation make all that ice in space not fit for human consumption?
No. It's
no,
okay.
Patrick.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
That's all you're getting, Patrick. No. Elias, you got anything to answer to that?
No, if you're thirsty in space, you're fine.
Dan asks, hello Dan, what's the update on our space agency? Is it still happening?
It has happened. So the Australian Space Agency was established last year, and it's gathering momentum. We're not going to be launching satellites ourselves or launching rockets, but we are coordinating space activities in Australia and interacting with the other space agencies around the world. So no, it's going great guns.
And Dr. Megan Clark, who's the head of that, is on tonight on the show, and we chat to her as well. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think she loves her job as well. Can you imagine? I'm in charge of the space agency. Sandra asks, hello Sandra, thank you for your question. When you bring rocks back from space, what are the chances that they will contaminate the Earth?
Good question. So we've brought back hundreds of kilograms of rocks from the moon, and we're very careful about handling those. Coming back to the radiation, because they've been bathed in radiation, that we believe has killed off any microbial content there, but we had to be very careful to make sure that that was the case, and we weren't when we were studying them. So there's been a couple of missions to asteroids to bring back materials from those, and again, there's a lot of thought goes into, we don't want, if there is microbial content there, we don't want that to infect the Earth, and we don't want to infect the asteroids either. So yeah, a lot of thought goes into dealing with material that we bring back from space. And if we go to Mars, we don't want to infect Mars with all our germs and microbes and bacteria.
That's right.
So yeah, a lot of thought goes into that.
In fact, the astronauts were themselves quarantined because, you know, when in the first missions, they had no idea, right? So they quarantined the stuff they brought back and the astronauts themselves.
I know. It's one thing bringing them back safe, but then what have they got? Is there anything they're bringing back? It's just, I mean, you have to really make that decision. You're going to give your life to it. We talked to an astronaut as well tonight, an Australian astronaut as well. So tune in. I won't say any more, otherwise you won't tune in. So many things to watch. First astronaut in space with a beard. I know, it's exciting. And since. Amy wants to know what would happen if an astronaut removed their helmet in space. I don't think it's good, Amy. That's all I'm going to say from this point. From a no idea point of view.
I think you could describe the experience as breathtaking.
Yeah.
The vacuum of space would suck the air out of your lungs very quickly, and you wouldn't have much time to describe the experience.
That's the thing. There's so many science fiction movies out there now. There's so many stories, very personal ones. You know, like a Sandra Bullock or a George Clooney being in space, and it's actually from a personal point of view. It's not just about what's going out there. Do you think it's a difficult thing that people at home, or people who are interested in space, it starts to kind of get mixed up a little bit? What's possible and what's actually filmmaking?
Yeah,
Do you watch movies all the time, Elias? No, that can't happen. It's silly.
Exactly. I mean, they don't always get it right, do they?
No.
I mean,
well, you know more than I. I'd be like, sure.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you shake your head and you go, oh, no, this is just just for the sake of making the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I guess a good director and scriptwriter would do the research to keep it as close to reality as possible, but you can't always rely on it. It's a bit of dramatization there.
Sandy's asking, looking at the Kepler Exoplanet, finds that there doesn't seem to be any system like ours. What are your thoughts on this, on the Kepler Exoplanet? What they found there?
So yeah, until 30 years ago, we only knew one star in our galaxy that had planets, and that was our sun. But over the last 30 years, there have been a lot of detections of exoplanets, planets around other other stars. And Kepler was a mission that launched specifically to look for planets around other stars. So now there's, I think, over 3,000 exoplanets that have been discovered. Now, a lot of those are much more massive than the Earth, simply because they're easier to detect. So there are probably planets like the Earth around other stars, just that they are harder to detect. But yeah, no, this is a really big field of astronomy at the moment, searching for planets around other stars.
I guess as the technology improves, you know, the
Yes.
smaller planets become easier to detect as well. But you know, like Phil said earlier, that our form of life is not the only possible form of life. In fact, we don't know what the universe concocts. So, as the technology improves, we may be able to detect life on planets that we didn't think could harbor life, but also, you know, be able to detect planets that are closer to the Earth's size.
Millicent has a tricky question. Do unmanned spacecraft, or unwomaned, thank you, like Voyager travel in straight lines? You know what I love? When you ask experts a question and they laugh. It's like, oh yes, this will be
Well, yes,
Yes,
they travel in straight
Millicent.
lines. But of course, as they travel past planets or other bodies in space, gravity causes their paths to bend. And they generally have some thruster system so that they can change their course to head off to their next target. But otherwise, yes, within the gravitational field, they travel in space in straight lines.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, this is Einstein, isn't it? Everything travels in a straight line. It's space-time that is curved.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Got some great questions coming in. Good on you. Keep them coming. Well done. Will space travel and tourism become affordable for the average person? Yeah, we were laughing about this the other day, just going, oh yeah, it'd be about $3 million just for a quick trip into space and back. But I mean, really, realistically.
Well, that's the aim of people like you know, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and those people. I mean, yeah, why not? I mean, affordable. I mean,
what's affordable?
Exactly,
like,
affordable.
It's
is
not a
one thing.
red deal, is it?
If you had to pay, you know, like Dennis Tito did, $25 million to go to space, that's not something that we can afford. But if you had to pay $50,000 to go to space, you know, would you maybe mortgage your house and go up?
There'll be a lot of crowdfunding going on. Send me to space. Well, I want to go too. You know, yeah, it'd be. But yeah, affordably, I don't know. I think we're a way off there. Yes. Paul asks. Actually, I do worry about this one. Will the astronauts going to Mars have to commit to spending the rest of their lives there at this stage?
I think we wouldn't send people there without some plan to bring them back.
Some people want to go though. They want to stay there and go, I don't need to come back.
And anyone who does go would have to be prepared for that as a possibility. So
yeah, that's the important point. That you know, you'd plan to bring them back, but you know, there's always with the moon landing, they prepared the second speech, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Just in case they were stranded. It's not an easy thing. It's, you know.
Can you tell us more about the second speech?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
It's very
because
interesting.
This is
so
such a high risk. It's
yeah.
such a high risk thing. This assumption it's all going to go well. It's not.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact wording, but it was to the effect that you know, fate has ordained that the people who those men who committed to go explore another world be kept at that other world in a sense.
Wow.
Would you know, remain there, and that it's pretty much impossible to bring them back. So it was really tricky because you know, in engineering we try to avoid single point failures. Basically something that you depend on critically, and you don't have an alternative. So when you look at the moon landing, those two astronauts who landed, Armstrong and Aldrin, they were reliant on a single rocket engine to blast them off the moon surface. If that had failed, there is no other way to bring them back. And you know rocket engines, how they fail. We see them on YouTube with launches blowing up, and there's a number of ways it could have failed. So it was amazing that they got back, but this is why the second speech was prepared.
Yeah. and it's why it's. I think we find it so fascinating. It's a particular anniversary, obviously, the 50th tonight or today. But again, every time the fascination of it is that it could happen at all, that it happened and successfully. Another question: food on Mars? Question mark. If we reach Mars, could we grow food there? Question mark. Thank you.
Well, if we send people there, we would have to grow
Something.
food.
Yes.
So we've seen The Martian, the movie The Martian, rather.
Yeah.
And that we know how they went about it. And yes, it would be possible to terraform some small patch of Mars. It wouldn't be easy, but yes, it would be possible.
I remember as kids, we just thought it was all about space food sticks. Remember, that was the food you would have when you would go up there. Caramel, chocolate. Yeah, not so much. One for you, Phil. Jonah, hello Jonah, is asking, how is the Square Kilometre Array coming along?
A great question. So the Square Kilometre Array is a next generation radio telescope. Ultimately, it will have a square kilometre of collecting area spread over a whole number of dishes and dipoles. So it's built in two parts. One part's being built in Western Australia. That's using some dipole arrays. And the other part's being built in South Africa with kind of the regular dishes that we think of for radio astronomy. We've been talking about the Square Kilometre Array for a long time, and we're making slow but steady progress. Last year there was an intergovernmental organisation set up. So it's an international project. No one country is going to take on the building of the Square Kilometre Array. But no, it's gaining pace. It'll be another perhaps 7 years before the first phase of it is built. But no, we're looking forward to having a new, very sensitive radio telescope to play with.
Elias, in the work that you do, in 10 years' time, what do you expect that you'll be able to see or do that you can't do now?
Well, one of the big areas of engineering now is off-Earth mining. And, space habitation and space transport requires that we try and procure our resources in space. Rather than transporting them from Earth. Like I said, you taking things up from Earth to even low Earth orbit, which is, only 1,000 kilometers up. It's not much compared to the Moon that is 300,000 kilometers. It's difficult. It costs a lot in terms of fuel. The fuel has to carry its own weight and so forth. So being able to source things like water, minerals, would facilitate not only our transport, but our ability to survive in space as well. So this is probably, there's space tourism, there is off-Earth mining, there's also, basically remote sensing. We've seen how far we've come with GPS being, you can't do anything without GPS now. Space is so crucial. So, being able to capitalize on what space has to offer us. But the other important thing is taking care of space, which is the issue of space debris. And that's a technological challenge as well. I've had students investigate the possibility of deorbiting things, bringing things back to Earth to help clean up the space environment. So that's another big challenge.
We're talking about debris and off-Earth mining tonight on the special with Brian Cox and I, so tune in for that. Very interesting. The things that you sort of, the space debris stuff is, we don't think about that, it's really important. We can't just go up there and explore what we want and not look after what's up there. It's still it's a beautiful environment we have to keep. What's the furthest we've travelled in space with and without humans?
So, so Voyager at the moment, the furthest thing. So with humans, I've already said that the Moon, or a little bit beyond, if to be exact. But without humans, Voyager is something like 20 billion kilometers away. It's left the solar system. So it's, I think it's now in the heliopause, which is sort of this area where what's considered to be where the sun's influence stops. That's why it's called the heliopause. And it's traveling at a massive 17 kilometers per second. So yeah, that's the furthest we've traveled.
We know that you love everything about space and stars and the moon, and certainly in the last couple of years with the Stargazing program, it's been incredible going up to Sighting Spring and being at the observatory and spending 6 days up there. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different with 50 years celebrating the moon landing. That's all we've got time for. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Elias. Thank you for both for being here this morning to answer, in an official capacity, our questions from our viewers. So tonight we're going to get stuck into much more space stuff on Stargazing Live on the ABC from 8 p.m. We've got astronauts, moon tours. We'll get a peek at the next generation of spacecraft, and you can watch me light some rocket fuel in a really safe space and in a safe environment with lots of safety experts, I promise. We also have a ton of things happening on the ABC Science Facebook page, including some tests that you can do to see if you are made of the right stuff to become an astronaut. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later.